Welcome back, guys. In this lesson we are going to talk about HTML forms. Okay, so HTML forms. What are HTML forms? HTML form is a document that store information of a user on a web server using interactive controls. Okay, so HTML form stores information of a user on the website. So whenever you need to get information like username, password, contact number, email address, credit card information, like that, whenever you need to get those kinds of information, then you would think about HTML form. Okay, so the elements used in HTML form are checkbox, input box, radio button, submit button, etc. Okay, so those are the elements used in HTML form. So with these, I'm going to teach you how to create HTML forms. Okay, so if you have the code file with you, I want you to open to HTML forms.html. Okay, so this way I'm going to teach you how to create an HTML form. So the first thing you would want to think about is to create an HTML form. You will start by creating HTML form tag. Okay, so this is the form tag. The form tag starts with a form, then closing tag here. Then inside of the form tag, you are going to have form elements. Okay, so I said form element is used to create an HTML form for user input. So the form element is a container for different type of input, such as text field, check boxes, radio button, submit button, etc. So I want to make this clear, very clear, by saying the form tag is used to create. Okay, so you know this is a tag, right? So this form tag is used to create an HTML form input, form for user input. So this form tag now, it can take in form element. So this here is form tag. Okay, so it will take in form elements like that. Okay, so this is a working example of form. Okay, these are the elements we are talking about: the text field, the radio button, check boxes, submit button, just like that. Okay, so those are the elements. Okay, so if you look at this code very well, we created a label, okay, for an input form. Okay, from an input field. Okay, so we created a label for an input field, which is over here. So another label here for an input field. Okay, so what is an input field? An input field is a field that allows you to get information, okay, from user. Okay, so that is what an input field is. Okay, so let me show you how this looks like in our browser. So you can see this is how a form element, this is how an HTML form looks like. Okay, so this is first name, input field, last name, input field. Okay, the radio button of, look at it, the radio button over here. This is it: HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So these are the label: HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So you can see it's also an input element. So all you just need to do is type radio. Okay, this over here, the first one here, is type text. So you need to change the attribute of type to text for it to take in text. You need to, if you want a radio button, you need to change the type to radio to get a radio button type. Okay, so I hope that is clear. So whenever you want to create a form, you have it in mind that you start with the form tag, inside the input field, then use the type, the attribute type, to create the type of input field you want. Probably you want an input field of text, the type of text, or input type of radio, or input type of checkbox. Okay, so that is how you to create a form. Okay, so that these things are called form elements. Okay, so that is that. Then after that, I add my submit button. Don't forget, I did that with input too. I now created type submit. Okay, so I created the type to be a submit. That is why I have the submit button. Value is the value that is on it, like the submit, you can see the value. Okay, so that is an example, a working example of form. So I hope you understand that this is how a form looks like. Okay, so we will quickly move on to the next one, which is the form attribute. Okay, so the form HTML form attribute, let's look at that. Okay, so we have a lot to treat here. Okay, so the form attribute, after creating the form, you would want to submit it to somewhere. You would want the form to behave somehow. So those things are called the form attributes. Okay, so the behavior of your form, what you would want your form to do, the attributes of your form, those are what makes up the attributes. Okay, so the first one we are going to talk about is the action attribute. The action attribute defines the action to be performed when the form is submitted. Usually the form data is sent to a file on the server when the user clicks on the submit button. In the example below, the form data is sent to a file called contact.php. So the file contains a server side script that handles the form. So this is what we are talking about here. Look at it. So this form action submits to contact.php. Okay, so this is the action over here. You can see the action attributes. If you look at it here very well, you can see the form, this action is an attribute to form. Okay, so the action attribute is specifying where your form wants to submit to. So where it wants to submit to is contact.php. Okay, so this contact.php is what would process your form. Okay, so after this form submits to contact.php, then your PHP file would handle the form, the form itself. So that is what that is how the form works. Okay, so that is that about the action attribute. So the next one we are going to talk about is the name attribute. Okay, so what are the name attributes? Each field must have a name attribute to be submitted. If the name attribute is omitted, the value of the input field will not be sent at all. So this is what we are talking about here. Look at this name over here. The name over here on the input field, you can see the name over here. So the name attribute here is for the input field of this first one, the name attribute. Let me preview this in the browser so you would understand what I'm talking about. Okay, you can see. So the first name here, the name attribute has a value of f name, which is first name. Okay, so what we are trying to say here is that without this name attribute, this particular input field will not be submitted. It will not be submitted. The data would not be submitted. So the reason why the data is submitted is because it has a name attribute. It has this name f name. Okay, so whenever you click on submit button, the form will carry whatever is on this name on this input field, which is the name attribute of first name, it will carry whatever data you put inside of this input field to the contact.php. I hope that is clear. So the reason why it carries it is because it has a name attribute. If your input field does not have a name attribute, it won't carry any data here. It won't send any data here to the contact.php. Okay, so that is how the name attributes work. So the target attribute. So what is the target attribute? The target attribute specify where to display the response that is received after submitting the form. So the target attribute specify where to display the response that is received after submitting the form. So the response that is received after submitting the form. Let's go to the target attributes. Look at it here. This target attribute on form here. So this target, which has the target attribute of blank. So whenever we submit this button, it is going to open a new blank page to go for it to submit to this contact.php. So when I click on submit right now, it is supposed to open a blank page. Look at it. Can you see? So it submits to contact.php. Look at it over here. So it is because I submit it here. Okay. So it is because it has a target blank. Okay. Assuming this one is target self, like this. Target self like this. Let me reload this. Okay, and close this. Let me reload this. You can see. So whenever I click on submit button, it is going to load on the same tab, browser tab. So if I use blank, it is going to open another tab for it to say I'm going on a blank tab. Okay, but if I use self, it is going to stay on the same page or the same tab. Okay, so that is how the self and the target attribute works. Okay, for self and blank. Okay, so that is what it is. Well, that is what it's known by, the target attribute. Okay, so the next one I'm going to talk about is the method attribute. So what is the method attribute? The method attribute specify the HTTP method to be used when submitting the form data. Okay, so it specifies the kind of HTTP method you want to use when you are submitting your form data. So the form data can be sent as URL variable, which is the get method, or as HTTP post transaction, which is the post method. So the default HTTP method when submitting form data is get. So I would quickly make this known to you that whenever you want to submit your form, you can use the post method, which is here, or you can use the get method like this. Whenever you decide not to use any of this method like this, it is going to use get by default. Okay, so when I reload this and submit it like this, you can see. Let me reload this. Let me take this target too. Okay, so let me save this. So whenever I reload this and submit it like this, you can see it is using the get method. How do I know it is using the get method? Look at this URL over here. You can see it is submitting first name Sam, last name equals Bello. So the get method, if you look at it over here, we says append form data to the URL. So you can see those data on the URL, okay, in name and value pairs. So this is the name and this is the value. Okay, so never use get to sense the sensitive data. So if you use that the get I'm using right now to send sensitive data, because if I do not use any method here over here, it is going to automatically use get, because get is the default method. So I can as well do it the same way like this and use get like this. So it's still going to give us the same result. Let me reload this and submit. You can see we are still getting the same result. Okay, so for the get now, we are saying it appends form data to the URL. So these are the form data in the URL, username and value pairs. So never use get to send sensitive data. So if you use get to send sensitive data, people are going to see, the user is going to see what you are sending on the URL, which is not secured. Okay, so the length of a URL is limited to 2048 characters. Okay, so this length of this URL over here is limited to 2048 character, which means get cannot be used to send a very big data. Okay, so that is why you can't use get to send a large chunk of data. Okay, so that is get for you. It is not secured. So that is why if you want to send the secure data, you should use post. So let's try out post and see how it looks like. So when I come here and change this to post like this, you can see. So whenever I change this to post and reload this page and submit, it is going to go to the contacts.php. Okay, so that is how the post method works, and does not have anything on the URL aside the page I am submitting to. Okay, so that is how the post method works. So for the post method, it says it appends the form data inside the body of the HTTP request. So it appends it inside the body of the HTTP request. So the submitted form data is not shown in the URL. You can see the submitted data is not shown in the URL. It only shows the page where you are submitting to. Okay, so post has no size limit. So it has no size limit. It can be used to send large amount of data. So it can be used to send as large as you like. Okay, as large of amount of data as you like. Okay, for submission with post cannot be bookmarked. Okay, so submission with post cannot be booked, whereas submission with get can be bookmarked. Okay, but submission with post cannot be bookmarked. Okay, so that is the difference between the get and the post method. So I think we have discussed and made the method attribute clear. So the method attribute is how you send your data to the server. Okay, so that is that about get and post method. So the last one I want us to discuss here is the autocomplete attribute. So what is the autocomplete attribute? The autocomplete attribute specify whether a form should have autocomplete or not. So when autocomplete is on, the browser automatically completes value based on the value that the user has entered before. So what is this one trying to tell us? What this one is trying to tell us is that, look at it here, over here, autocomplete attributes equals on. So whenever this autocomplete attribute is on, you can have an autocomplete over here. So whenever I type S, it is going to bring the SAM that I have entered previously. Okay, so that is the essence of autocomplete. So if I make this off over here like this and save off like this and save, you can see that. Let me reload the page. I've reloaded the page. Okay, so you can see that if I type S, it is not going to bring autocomplete. A, it is not going to bring autocomplete. So I need to type all the letters by myself. Okay, so that is the essence of autocomplete in form attribute. The next one we are going to talk about here is the HTML element. So what are the HTML elements? So we have a list of HTML elements that you can use. Okay, I told you if you want to use form, you are going to create the form tag, and inside of the form tag you are going to have the HTML element. Okay, so the list of HTML elements you can use inside the form tag is input label, select, text area, button, field set, legend, data list, output, option, and opt group. Okay, so those are list of HTML elements. You can put them on Google to see more about this element. Okay, so you can actually use them on your form, in space of your form element. Okay, so you can have as you can have as much as many elements you need on your HTML form. Okay, the next one we are going to talk about is HTML input type. Okay, so the input type, there are different types of HTML. Okay, or there are different, okay, here are the different input type you can use in HTML. Okay, so we discussed about the input type. Okay, so if you want to change the type, look at this type over here. Let me go to the HTML form and you will see the input over here. You can see the type over here is text. Okay, so input type here, if you change it to button, it's going to be button. If you change the type into checkbox, it's going to be checkbox. If you change the type to color, it's going to be color. Date and time, email, file, hidden. So these are the types of the inputs that you can use. You can use search, you can use reset, you can use tell, which is the telephone, text, time, URL, week. You can use any type of input that you like. Okay, so these are the input type that are available in HTML, in your HTML form. Okay, so the next one we are going to talk about is input type attributes. Okay, so HTML input type attributes. So what are the input type attributes, or how are they being used? I would show you here what you can do with the input type attributes. So I think you know about the input type. These are the input type over here. Input type text. Okay, so we want to talk about these input attributes. Okay, so the first one we want to talk about is the value attribute. So inputs normally have value attributes. So when you say input, let me preview this in the browser for you to see. Okay, this is it on the browser. Okay, so whenever you use, this is not clear. Hold on, let me quickly make this more readable. So last name, you have break over here. Select first name, last name, address. So this should have a break. Yeah. Okay, so let me refresh. Okay, this is cool. Pin, this should have a break. Yeah. Okay, so select file, this should have a break here. Okay, so country code, this has a double break. I need just one break. Okay, so this should have a break here. This should have a break here. Okay, so enter phone number. So this should have a break here too. Sorry. Okay, so let me refresh this. Okay, I think this is a lot more better. Okay, so what we are trying to talk about here is input attributes. Okay, so what are the input attributes? So the input has different attributes. So the first one we are going to talk about is the value attribute. So this value attribute, as you can see here, it says the input value attribute specified an initial value for an input field. Okay, so it's specified. Look at the value over here. So it has an initial value of Sam. So when I change this to, okay, I can change this to Bello and make this Sam. So when I refresh this, you can see we have Bello Sam as the initial attribute. Okay, so that is that about value attributes for input fields. Okay, so the next one we are going to talk about is the read-only attribute. So what are the read-only attributes? If you look it over here, you can see. So the read-only attributes would allow, or the read-only attributes specify that an input field is only read-only, so it cannot be edited. Look at it. So where is the read-only? Let's check it. The read-only is on the below. So this cannot be edited. It can only, I'm pressing backspace right now and it is not working because it's a read-only there is a read-only attribute on it, you can see. So it's actually read-only on the input field. Okay, so that is that about read-only attributes. So you can see a read-only input field cannot be modified. That is why when I press the backspace it would not work. However, a user can tab it and highlight it. So I can highlight it like this, you can see, and copy the text from it. So I can copy the text from it. Okay, so the value of a read-only input field will be sent when submitting the form. So whenever I submit the form with a submit button, assuming a submit button is over here, okay, let's create one. Whenever I use the submit button, it is actually going to submit the read-only input field. So to create a submit button, I'm going to say input like this, input button like this. Okay, so I'm going to use the value of submit like that. Okay, so whenever I save and refresh, you can see the submit button. So I need a break over here to bring it down, a break tag to bring it down. Okay, so the submit button is here. Okay, so that is that about the read-only attribute and the submit button. Okay, so I hope that is clear. So the next one is the disable attribute. So whenever you want to disable a field, you are going to use disable attribute. So let's come to the attribute and you will see the disable attribute on address. I think it's on address. You can see the disable over here. It's an attribute on the input field. This is the input field. So the disable over here is an attribute. Okay, so whenever you use this disable, it is actually going to disable the field. Okay, so we say here that the disable attribute, or you can see the disable attribute, the input disable attribute specify that an input field should be disabled. Okay, so a disabled input field is unusable and unclickable. So this cannot be clicked and it cannot be used. Okay, so the value of a disabled input field will not be sent when submitting the form. Okay, so that's the difference between this disable attribute and the read-only attribute. Okay, for the read-only attribute, the value will be sent to the server, and for the disable attribute, the value will not be sent to the server. Okay, so we have another one which is the max length attribute. So the max length attribute here, over here, you can come here and see the max length attribute. Okay, so the next one is the max length, which is over here, max length. So this one is telling us that the maximum length of the field that the pen should take, this pen over here, it should be 4. So I don't think I can type more than 4 characters on it. You can see I can type this it should be 4. It can be numeric, and it can be alphabetical. So it can be alphanumeric, but the character should not be 4 because I'm using maximum length of 4. Okay, so that is that about max length attribute. So the next one we are going to talk about is the multiple attribute. So the multiple attribute specify that the user is allowed to enter more than one value in an input field. So it specify that the user is allowed to enter more than one value. So whenever the user wants to enter more than one value in an input field, so you are going to use the multiple attribute. So the multiple attribute works with the following input type. You can use it on email and file. So I'm going to show you an example on file here. So when you come here over here and see the file over here, select file. So we have the multiple attributes here. So this would allow us to choose more than one file. Okay, so whenever I say choose, and I'm going to be able to select more than one file. Okay, so I think I have file on the pictures. Okay, so I can go to the pictures over here. So I can select more than one file. Okay, so if I should select this, it's going to allow me and select and shift select this, so I can have 2 files. So you can see I have 2 files because I'm using multiple attributes on it. Assuming I'm not using multiple attributes, I would only be allowed to select 1 file. You can try that yourself and see it for yourself. Okay, so that is that about the multiple attribute. So the next one we are going to talk about is the pattern attribute. So the input pattern attribute specify a regular expression that the user or that the input field value is checked against. Okay, so when the form is submitted, so the input field attribute or input pattern attribute specify a regular expression that the input field value is checked against when the form is submitted. So the pattern attribute works with the following input type. It works with the text, date, search, URL, telephone, email, and password input types. Okay, so this is what we are talking about here. When you look at this input attribute, it is on what's it called, country code. Okay, so we have when you look at this pattern attribute, it is on country code. You can see that the pattern over here is saying that it should allow A to Z of capital letter pattern. So whenever you type A, capital letter A, B, T to Z, it is going to work. And whenever you type small letter A to Z, it is going to work. Okay, so and it should be 3. You can see it should be 3 characters. So whenever you type A, B, C, it's going to work. When you type D, like that, to let me see the pattern attribute. Okay, so regular expression that the input field is checked against. Okay, so when the form is submitted, so it is checked against the regular expression. Look at the regular expression over here. So this is the regular expression A to Z, okay, of capital letter, and A to Z of small letter. Okay, so that is that about the pattern attribute. This year, I think I will leave that in the comment section. I can't remember what this is used for, but I'll put that in the comment section whenever I remember that, or when I search through and get what it is being used for. Okay, so that is that about the pattern attribute. Okay, the next one we are going to talk about is the placeholder attribute. So what is the placeholder attribute? So the next one is the placeholder attribute, where is the placeholder. So this is the placeholder attribute. The placeholder would actually give a dummy text for you to see on the screen. Okay, so these are the dummy text. It's not a real value. Okay, so this means this should take a placeholder of phone number. It shows how the phone number should look like. So whenever you use the placeholder, you are trying to tell the user that this is the format the phone number should look like. So, or this is the format the value of the input type or input text should look like. Okay, so that is that about the placeholder attribute. So you can see here that we said the input placeholder attribute specify a short int. Okay, so that describe the expected value of an input field. Okay, so that is that about the placeholder attribute. So the next one we are going to talk about is the required attribute. So the required attribute specify that an input field must be filled out before submitting the form. So it's specified that input field must be filled out before submitting the form. So when you look at this username here, we have a required attribute over here. Look at the input, you can see required attribute. Okay, so it's specified that this input field must be required. So if I submit this, it is not going to submit because this field username is required. Okay, so that is that about the required attribute. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Okay, so the next one we have to talk about here is the autofocus attribute. Okay, so the autofocus attribute here is still on the username. Okay, so you can see autofocus here, so which means the first let me see. So autofocus attribute, the input autofocus attribute specify that an input field should automatically get focus when the page loads. Okay, so when this page loads, the first field that will be focused on is this username that has an autofocus attribute. Okay, so this has an autofocus attribute. That is why it's specified. That is why it does not start from here. It starts from here. Okay, so whenever I reload the browser, you can see it is autofocus over there. Okay, so that's that about autofocus. So the next one is the autocomplete attribute. So the autocomplete attribute, so I think we've discussed that in the previous lesson on how the autocomplete works. Okay, you can actually add the autocomplete attribute on the form. We've discussed that in the previous one. Okay, but the input, you can also use it on the input. So we are saying the input autocomplete attribute specify whether a form or input field should have autocomplete on or off. Okay, so autocomplete attributes allow the browser to predict the value when a user starts to type in a field. I think we've shown that in our previous topic. Okay, that's that about HTML input attributes. I hope you enjoy this lesson. Thanks for watching this video. Send your questions and subscribe for more lessons like this.